consortium with the Islamic theological tradition.
No, and it's been there. I mean, our theologians were very committed to that idea that faith had to be based on reason. That they were very troubled by circular reasoning. They call it dawr wa tasalsul. I mean, we studied these things in our theological training. That you can't argue. The Quran has to be proven, to be true rationally. So there's all these books written making rational proofs of why it's revelation. There's all these, because they needed to ground it in that. And so I think that's foundational to the understanding that you had to have faith and reason, and that component was so important. And also, there's no verses in the Quran where any coercion is mentioned. About the Quran states clearly in chapter 18, فَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. Whoever wants to believe, let him believe. It literally says, فَلْيُؤْمِنْ, let him believe. And whoever wants to disbelieve, فَلْيَكْفُرْ, let him disbelieve. And then the Prophet Muhammad, it was said to him, in the Quran, can you compel people to be believers? In the second chapter of Baqarah, it says that there can be no coercion in the religion. That reason is clear from unreason or error. That, the reason, it's clear, this is clear. So you can't force people, let them think about this. Even in the chapter where they say about killing people in Surah At-Tawbah, which is the 9th chapter, and this is always quoted by people saying that Islam is violent. It says to kill the polytheists wherever they are. And that verse, which is in that chapter, that verse was a time-specific verse because the polytheists had broken the treaty with the Muslims. They had a treaty, and they had broken it by killing Muslims. And then they went to Mecca, which was a sanctuary at that time, and they had captives, and it was permission to fight in the sanctuary. That was not a universal thing to, isn't this what you were taught? This is what we were taught. And then it says immediately after that, but if one of them wants to hear the word of God, let him hear the word of God. And then it says, and if he decides not to believe, then take him to a safe place and leave him alone. Right? So, this is this decontextualization and the idiotic people, quoting. I had one of my teachers, somebody got up in a lecture and quoted this verse in the Quran that says, whoever doesn't judge by God, he's a disbeliever. And he said to him, which chapter is that in? He said, I don't know. And he said, what was the verse before it so I can know the context? He said, I don't know. He said, what was the verse after it? He said, I don't know. He said, what do you do? He said, I'm a mechanic. He said, fix cars. Like I said, these books are dangerous books. And you have to have a scholastic tradition that is able to navigate these meanings. So, the Prophet ﷺ nobody during his lifetime was killed for apostasy. Nobody. And there are apostasy laws. Just like in Catholicism, you can find in church canon law, you can find apostasy laws. There are apostasy laws. There's one hadith that they base these on. But there are other hadiths, and they weren't in agreement upon this. One of the greatest scholars of Islam, Atta, did not believe that there should be any capital offense in apostasy. Now, the idea, and in our Supreme Court in 1955, there was an argument, and you know much better than I do, I think it was about polygamy, which, that...
The polygamy case was back in the 19th century, the Mormon polygamy case called Reynolds.
But which was the one where it was said the freedom that religious freedom is the freedom to believe but not necessarily the freedom to act.
Oh, what was that?
Well, in Jehovah's Witnesses case from 1940 says that.
Yeah. It might have been.
Gabitis and Barnett.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, that, obviously, there's a lot of room for interpretation on what that means, right? Sure. But traditionally, many people did not believe in Islam. And I guarantee you there are many people in the Muslim world that do not believe in Islam. But they don't go out into the society and declare these things, not necessarily because... they can't do it, but because they understand that this will really affect the social fabric. That, first of all, people end up losing the whole, marriage, all these things. Because in Islamic law, if you're, a Muslim woman cannot marry a non-Muslim man by law. And a Muslim man, although he can marry a Jew or a Christian woman, is not encouraged to do so. But he has that dispensation. And so, the other thing that's very problematic in Islamic tradition, and I have to say this, full disclosure, the Islamic tradition is not amenable to the same degree that other traditions are to reformation. The reason for that is the Islamic tradition actually sees itself as a reformation of the Jewish and Christian sectarianism. Throughout the Quran, there are verses that say, do not turn into sects like the Jews and the Christians did before you. Right? And the Middle East was filled with Jacobites and Nestorians and Syrian Orthodox and Catholics and Coptic. All these sects, right, were there. So, and there are many verses saying, don't change your religion after it's been given to you. So it's much more difficult for us to deal with it. And that's why we have to find the sources from our tradition. And they're there. That's the beauty of the tradition. Those sources are there. Those dissenting opinions are there. And those dissenting opinions need to be brought to the forefront. Because right now they're in the background. And that's something, we're sitting under these Babylonian bricks worrying about them falling on our heads. But we tend to just forget about things in the background when we're so focused on the foreground. But very often in religious thinking and tradition, we have to look at the richness of the tradition and bring things that in the past have been in the background and bring them into the foreground. And this gives it a much stronger basis for convincing Muslims around the world about, and this is what I try to do, find those sources. I have Muslims all the time saying, I can't believe that. I say, it's right there. It's, here's the hadith. Look, that the Prophet ﷺ said that. The Prophet said once, he said, none of you, this is a sound hadith in Imam Ahmad's Musnad. This is very important amongst Muslims, whether the hadith is sound or weak. This is a sound hadith, so it has authority. But, it says that none of you truly believes until you have mutual mercy. And one of the companions said, all of us are merciful. He said, no, it's not the mercy a man shows to his friend. It's rahmatul amma, universal mercy. Mercy for all of creation. And it's not just, it includes animals. The Prophet was very concerned about harming animals. How can you have a religious tradition that can blow up people, on buses and little children and things like that, and you're not allowed to kill frogs? It's just so weird, this modern madness.
Time for one more question.